Well, I briefly wanted to mention one of my favorite murder mysteries. And you may wonder what this has to do with the story we're telling you tonight, but it's a story written by Agatha Christie. It's called Murder on the Orient Express, and it's the story of this train line that runs from Istanbul to Paris, and it brings the mystery of the East to the rationalism of the West. And during the early part of the century, this work of fiction tells of this train, and of course there are a number of Americans on it, and there is a Monsieur Poirot, who is a Belgian police officer. He's a Belgian detective. He's the hero of many Agatha Christie murder mysteries, murder stories. And there's a very disreputable American on this train who tells Monsieur Poirot that somebody's trying to kill him, and he wants Monsieur Poirot to protect his life, and he'll give him $5,000. He'll give him $10,000. He's worried about his life. And Monsieur Poirot says, no, I'm not interested. And that night, that very night, this man is murdered. And he's stabbed to death. And there's a question of who did it. And of course, Monsieur Poirot is recruited by the member of the board that controls the railway to find out who the murderer is. And they happen to be trapped in the snowdrift somewhere in the great mountains along the route of the Orient Express. And Monsieur Poirot says, there are too many clues. There are too many clues. And as we look at the world today, and we see this move towards the New World Order, we sometimes face exactly the same issue. There are just too many clues out there. In fact, we talk to people about what's really behind everything that's going on. And some people will tell you it's the bankers. It's the bankers because when we have wars, bankers make money. And if you read Professor Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope, on page 324, he'll tell you how the central bankers are working in concert to create a feudalistic system by which they'll control the nations of the world by financial flow, and they're doing it secretly, and the banks are working all together. And people will tell you it's the bankers, and other people say, oh, it's not the bankers, it's the Jewish bankers. It's the Jewish bankers, and they will tell you that the Federal Reserve has two types of stock, Class A and Class B, and all this money is going overseas, but there's no evidence of any of that. And the tragedy is, if you look at the central bankers of the world, most of them are not Jewish, and that's what Professor Quigley says in his book. The vast majority of the central bankers are not Jewish at all. Well, there are other people who are going to say, oh, you don't understand. It's really the Council on Foreign Relations. Because since 1953, every chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, the head of the central bank in America, has come from the Council on Foreign Relations. Do you realize that every head of the Arms and Disarmament Agency in the United States since 1953 has come from the CFR. All but one Secretary of State, all but one Assistant Secretary of State, all but one Director of the CIA since 1953 has come from the Council on Foreign Relations. And furthermore, 7 of the last 9 presidents came from the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is America's invisible government that's running the world. And people say, no. Council on Foreign Relations just is for America. It's the Bilderbergers, because the Bilderbergers combines the people of great wealth in America and the socialists in America, and they work with the Europeans. They meet on a regular basis, and they pick our presidents, and Bill Clinton was picked by the Bilderberger group, and people said, no. It's the Trilateral Commission, because that includes the people from the Orient and from Japan and from the Pacific Rim. And this is an international movement towards world control. And others are going to say, you don't understand, it's really communism. Communism is the real enemy. Most people think that communism is dead. Communism isn't dead. The whole fall of communism was a sham. In fact, Gorbachev had actually created the Green Cross Foundation in the United States, taken the papers out for it 6 months before the phony revolution over there. Communism is in full military production for war. Don't you know that? You hear how the soldiers are starving, but they're building new nuclear weapons and new mobile intercontinental missiles, and America's unilaterally disarming, and that doesn't make any sense. And China's in full production for war, and there are 1.25 billion people who live under communism in China, and our government is doing everything they can to help them. And most favored nation treaty status, but not just that. Do you realize that 2/3 of all the new industries going in there are financed by American corporations and American international banks? Communism's the enemy. And others will say, oh, it's not communism at all, it's socialism, because every communist is a socialist, and there's a Socialist International out there, second, third most powerful organization in the world, and it has regular meetings, and the socialists throughout the world meet, and they work in conjunction with the communists to further their goals. And they say, oh no, it isn't. That is the humanist, because every communist and every socialist is a humanist. And if you haven't read the Humanist Manifesto, they've laid the whole plan out for world domination, and they're socialists, and they want world government, and they're pro-abortion and pro-homosexual and pro-criminal and pro-drug, and it's the humanists. And then there's people who say, oh no, it's the foundations. The great foundations of America, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, they're funding everything that's gone on in our society. They've been doing it for the last 100 years, and they're intent upon world government and socialism. And others will say, oh no, it's the Illuminati. It's the Illuminati. In fact, haven't you ever looked on the back of a dollar bill? You look on the back of that dollar bill, and what do you see there? You see the pyramid with the all-seeing eye over the top of that, and that's the symbol of the Illuminati. You see that? The number down underneath it says 1776, and that was the date that the Illuminati was founded. But the problem with that is that the Great Seal of the United States, from which this occult emblem came, and it isn't a cult emblem, and that's not the eye of the god that we worship. That's the sun god. If you read occultist, that's the eye of Horus. That is indeed is the eye of Lucifer that's on the back of the dollar bill. But this design, at least the great eye, was actually suggested in 1790, just 4 years after the Illuminati was founded, and it didn't have its tentacles into America at that time. This was actually put on the back of the Great Seal of the United States in 1782, just 6 years after the Illuminati was founded. And the 1776, from the very inception, when they were designing the Great Seal, had to do with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The Illuminati was a very powerful force in Europe. It infiltrated the Masonic lodges and played a part in the French Revolution. Others will say it's not the Illuminati, it's the Lucis Trust. If you've never heard of the Lucis Trust, it used to be called the Lucifer Trust. And this whole thing is Luciferian, and the Lucis Trust used to be right in the United Nations Plaza, and it's working today. And you'll find people like Robert Mueller and Theodore Hirschberg, formerly at Notre Dame, and many of our key and most important people in America are tied into the Lucis Trust, which used to be the Lucifer Trust, and it's all Luciferian. And others are going to say, no, you don't understand. It's the Masons. Do you realize that 14 American presidents have been Masons? Do you realize that people wonder why they took God out of our schools and God out of our public exhibits? Why we can't have four of the Supreme Court judges, of the 6 Supreme Court judges who voted to do that, were Masons, and the Masons have always supported separation of church and state in this wall of church and state because they worship a different God. And this indeed is a Masonic symbol. It isn't an Illuminati symbol. This is the Masons. And others are going to say, well, it isn't really the Masons, it's the New Age. The New Age has infiltrated every aspect of our life today. It's every place. If you haven't read the book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, you can get it, written by Marilyn Ferguson. And, if you look on the front of that, the symbol of theirs almost looks like 3 sixes intertwined. The New Age movement is certainly one of the most powerful movements in the world today. And then there's others who say, oh no, it's the oligarchy, it's the ruling houses of Europe. These are the royal blood that's been there for years, working behind the scenes, because one of them eventually will become the king of Jerusalem, who will be the Antichrist. And then there's the story of the Priory of Sion, which was supposedly a secret society that's been written about in a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and they claim that this secret society goes back to the bloodline of the union of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. And of course this is totally blasphemous, but there are really people who believe that the Priory, the Sion, and their Moravian kings and Moravian lines go into the Habsburgs and into Prince Carlos of Spain, King Carlos of Spain. And then of course there are others who really believe that we're dealing with the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucians come out of the mystery religions. It's a powerful secret society. It has branches right over in San Jose, in California, in the East, all throughout America. There are others who will tell you it's the Skull and Bones Society. After all, George Bush came from there. William Buckley came from there. Ties into the Central Intelligence Agency, secret society out of Yale. Other people, of course, will tell you it's Theosophy. Madame Blavatsky's secret society. Has their headquarters up here at Ojai, back at Wheaton, Illinois. It has tentacles into every aspect of our society. There are others who tell you it's really the UFOs and those foreign little critters who are here beaming ideas down into our minds. And I'm reminded then of what Monsieur Perrault, as he analyzed what was happening on the Orient Express. And of course now they're trapped in a snowdrift, and he's talked to all of the various suspects, and every single one of them had a motive for killing this American. And of course he is totally puzzled. There are too many clues. Everybody there has a motive.